The movie opens in the 1970s at a suburban home, where Jean narrates she and Eddie fell in love and got married. They bought a house and are gonna have a kid, but couldn't, and every morning Eddie leaves the house and she is alone. That day, Eddie returns home with a baby, and when Jean asks about it, he tells her that it's their baby, but Jean says she is not in the mood for his sick jokes. And Eddie assures he is their baby. Jean is confused and asks Eddie from where did he get the baby, but he doesn't want to talk about it. When Jean asks his name, and Eddie explains it's whatever she wants it to be. The next morning, Eddie tells Jean that he won't be home that night. When she is about to ask him something, the doorbell rings, and he invites a few people, and it is clear that Eddie is involved in some shady dealings. That night, there is a banging on the door, and one of Eddie's associate Jimmy arrives. He tells her something has happened and she needs to leave. He takes her to Eddie's closet and collects the stashed money. While Jean asks what's happening, he tells her there is no time and she will leave with Cal, and Jean asks him about Eddie, but he just instructs her to hold on to the money and Cal will manage how it will be spent. She takes the baby and leaves the house, where Cal picks her up. They get to a hotel, and Jean demands an explanation. Jean reveals that she knows Eddie is a thief, but Cal doesn't reveal anything and says his job is to keep them safe. Jean names the baby Harry as Cal keeps addressing him as baby. She learns that they don't know how long they have to hide, and doesn't know where to live. Jean wants to call Eddie to check if he is okay, but Cal tells her she can't, as he was missing, and people are looking for him, and her as well. So Jean demands for a nice house near a park, where she can take a walk with a stroller. One night Harry got sick and burning up with fever, and Jean wants to take him to the hospital despite Cal's warning that they can't speak to anyone. They eventually take Harry to the hospital. Cal notices a nurse who starts doubting them, and he walks towards the window to find a police car entering the premises. They decide to leave quickly without being checked out, and walks past the cops as they walk in. They quickly drive away and end up sleeping in the car. Cal was awoken by a police officer, who suspects that Cal must be bothering her, but Jean tells the officer that Cal is her husband and comes up with a story to convince the officer to leave. She tells Cal she never knew she could lie that way. Cal brings Jean to a home that has been set up for her. He gives her a phone number to call in case of emergency, and tells her not to speak to anyone. She doesn't want Cal to leave her alone, as she was never been by herself. But Cal says they both have to do the best they can. Over the next few days Jean lives in that house, and struggles with loneliness in her new surroundings. She doesn't step out of the house or communicate with anyone, until one day her neighbor Evelyn shows up to say hello. She says her friends used to live there. Jean tells her that her name is Mary, and Evelyn gives her flowers before leaving. Jean soon becomes lonely and angry. She gets frustrated to the point where she throws eggs at her wall inside her kitchen. That night Evelyn arrives with a homemade meal and wine. Jean lets her in defying Cal's instructions, and she is happy for some food and company. Evelyn asks where the bathroom is, which makes Jean suspicious as she said her friends used to live there and she asks Evelyn that she should know where it is. Evelyn says she must be getting old faster than she thought. After a moment of suspicion, Jean lets it go, and after a while Evelyn leaves to her home. Later that night, Jean goes downstairs and finds the front door open. After hearing someone's presence at downstairs, she rushes to get Harry and locks herself in a closet, where she uses the phone to call the number Cal left, but no one answers at the other end. Jean then escapes out through the back window and flees to Evelyn's place, where she finds two men with guns waiting for her, and they have Evelyn tied and gagged to a chair. One of them asks where Eddie is, insisting she knows, but Jean says she doesn't know anything. The two men are suddenly shot by Cal, who sees Evelyn and shoots her too. Jean is horrified, saying that Evelyn was innocent, but Cal says that she saw him killing and suspects that she might be involved. He then tells her Evelyn was dead the moment Jean let her in. He then angrily tells her to feed Harry as he was crying, but she screams and says she can't. They stop by the pharmacy to get the formula. Later, she reveals to Cal that she can't breastfeed, as she couldn't have children and lost several pregnancies, and she made peace with that as she doesn't want to bring a kid into their troubled lives, because of Eddie's crime record, but deep down she always wanted to have kids, and then one day Eddie shows with a baby he got from a girl, who was pregnant and was going to be disowned by her family. Cal takes Jean out to his family's cabin, where he made all the arrangements for her. He tells her there is no phone in the house, but shows her a secret space under the floor where she can hide in case of any trouble. Cal was about to leave, and Jean asks about the money she left at the house. Cal thinks it is long gone now. He explains that he worked for Eddie, and the night they left, Eddie killed their boss, Marvin, and after they left the house that night, Marvin's men came to her house looking for her and killed Jimmy. Cal claims all these incidents left the city in chaos, and says that's all he knows. Jean says Eddie would never kill anyone, and Cal tells her Eddie has been a killer for a long time. She once again asks him where Eddie was, and Cal says he didn't know. One day, she notices a vehicle approaching the cabin. She quickly grabs Harry and hides in the secret space, but it turns out just to be Cal's family. His son Paul, his wife Terry, and his dad Art. They join Jean and begin staying at the cabin. One day, Art shows Jean how to use a gun, which frightens her. She goes to ask Terry why Art is teaching her to use it. Terry reveals that they saw guys outside their apartment. After a few nights, Cal got paranoid and he packed up and sent them to the cabin, and tells Jean to be prepared for what comes next. Jean deduces that Terry used to be married to Eddie, and reveals she never knew that Eddie had another wife. Jean soon realizes the reality of her situation and decides to learn using a gun. Cal was supposed to come shortly after his family, but he doesn't show up. This bothers Jean and asks Terry, who is planned to leave in the middle of the night, to go find him without telling her, but Jean stops her and demands to go with her to find their husbands and get answers, and Terry agrees. They head to the city, and end up at a parking lot, from where Terry shows Jean the apartment they used to live. Terry then gives Jean a gun. Terry takes Jean to a club, where they go to a back room so Terry can meet Mike. Jean hears from a man at the club that Terry took Eddie's whole life from him, but Eddie started whole new life and a new family, and that man warns Jean to be careful with Terry. Jean confronts Terry about Paul being Eddie's son, but Terry says they need to leave right away. Suddenly, they hear gunshots from the club, with no way out. Terry puts Jean into a phone booth and tells her to stay there. When the gunman passes by to go into the back room and start shooting, Jean flees from the club out into the night. Jean wanders all night, being alone and unable to find her way. The next morning, things get worse for her as it starts raining, and she walks into a laundromat for shelter and she breaks down. She goes to the apartment that Terry had previously mentioned staying. She finds Terry, who tells her she came back for her but she was gone. Terry tells Jean that she and Eddie had Paul the year they got married, but upon finding what he does, she wanted to leave, but Eddie promised his next job will be his last, but it never was. She then mentions Cal, who was Eddie's guy, but was scared of Eddie's methods and operations, and he was always there for her. They soon start confiding in each other and eventually fell in love. Jean learns it was Eddie they were hiding from while staying at the apartment. Eddie finally found them and made a deal, where Terry and Cal could be together and get out of the business, but one day Eddie would call and Cal wouldn't be able to say no, and Jean learns the call was to save her. Terry explains that she and Cal both have normal jobs, and Paul thinks Cal is his father. As the time went, they thought that they might have gotten out, and was planning to disappear by the time they got the call. She then says that she shouldn't have taken her to the club, as she knew it's dangerous there since Eddie killed Marvin. But she thinks going there was the best option, as the word will get to Cal that she is in the city, and Cal will find them. Jean learns that Mike and Eddie used to work together until Eddie shot Mike's ear off. They decide to wait until Cal can contact them. Eventually Terry gets the call from Cal, and the two begin to leave to meet him, but learn there are men out front. Terry takes Jean out of the back and tells her she will meet her at their destination. Jean hugs Terry, and Terry tells her no matter what she hears she must keep walking. As she heads off, Jean hears gunshots. Jean meets Cal at a diner, where he tells her Eddie is dead. She was shocked and took a moment. Jean wants to go far away, where she and Harry can live peacefully. Jean notices Cal has a gunshot in his side and asks if Eddie did that, but Cal says Eddie was dead before he got there. After a while, Terry arrives, and they both embrace. The three of them drive away, but Cal is still anxious as Mike's men were at their apartment. Jean thinks it's strange they would be after them when Eddie is dead, but Cal says Mike must not know. Suddenly a car rams them, and the chase ensues. They mislead them and finally manage to escape, before they end up crashing into another car. Cal and Terry become unconscious, and Mike drags Jean out of the car and drives away with her at gunpoint. Mike is extremely violent, who kills his man for asking too many questions. He demands to know where Eddie is, and Jean tells him he's dead. Mike warns her not to lie to him, and suddenly gets shot in the head by Jean. She drives the car back to Cal and Terry, who are both still alive. Jean drags the bodies out of his car, wipes their guns down, and leaves the guns with them. She and the wounded Terry drag Cal to the car. She then tells Terry that she killed Mike, and they head back to the cabin. They arrive at the cabin to find a car and a dead man on the ground in front of the cabin. Terry hands Jean her gun, and Jean goes in to investigate. Inside she finds another man dead, along with Art, who has also been killed. She goes to the secret space under the floor and finds Paul and Harry. She makes Paul close his eyes as takes him out of the cabin. They get into the car and Jean drives off as they are free to live their lives peacefully. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.